Good afternoon and welcome to a water cooler conversation special, although not in front of a water cooler today because I'm working from home, but all surrounding the latest spring statement that Rishi Sunak announced to the House of Commons about an hour to an hour and a half ago. So this is just really our sort of sum up as to how it affects potential both employers and employees in the dental sector. We try and do these on every autumn and spring statement announcement, so we try and keep it as brief as possible in this particular one, because to be fair, there wasn't that much meat in what he actually discussed. You'll probably see the big headlines about, biggest tax cut in 20 years. But of course, I'll come on to that, but that is a little bit of a headline grabber as opposed to the reality as to what's actually happening at the moment. Being a spring statement, it was light on detail in comparison to the autumn statement, which is the full budget. So it isn't designed to be a full budget. It is designed to be an update. But of course, it has now become known for introducing small changes to taxation structure in the UK, largely to meet sort of political demands. So this is in the context of the fact that this morning it was announced that inflation hit its highest rate in give or take about 30 years at 6.2%, which is meant to average out at about 7.4% across the year, which is, of course, is fairly significant inflation and the highest we've seen, as I said, for about 30 years. So this statement was in response to that and how it's going to help those lower earners in the UK with the touted cost of living crisis. So the big announcements that probably affect those employers and employees within the dental sector are twofold, really. The first is with regard to the fuel duty. Now, again, probably more of a headline grabber than actually something that's really going to affect you in the pocket in the long term. There's a 5 pence per litre cut until March next year from 6 o'clock tonight. Now, 5 pence per litre, if you've got an 80 litre tank, means that your petrol bill will cost about £4 less. Now, when you look at how much inflation there has been on petrol and diesel prices over the last just sort of fortnight alone, that £4 isn't really going to go that far unless you're actually someone who's doing lots of travelling for work, which most people in the dental sector aren't. Once again, that isn't really going to be something that's going to make an enormous impact. Probably the biggest announcement of what's going to affect people in the immediacy is the change to the national insurance contributions thresholds for employees. Now, that has always been set slightly lower than the income tax rate threshold, and it's being increased to meet with parity for the basic rate tax threshold. So what that essentially means is that whereas before the budget, you would have started paying national insurance contributions if you're an employee at around £9,580, going into 2022-2023 tax year, you will now not start paying national insurance contributions until you reach £12,570. Now, you have to remember that this is alongside the introduction of the national insurance levy, which comes into place for employees and employers from the 1st of April, which is in essence an increase in the rate of national insurance contributions by 1.25 percentage points. So the design of this, if you like, is to offset the increase in national insurance contributions for those who are the lowest earners. So to give you an example of someone who is working 40 hours a week on the new national living wage of £9.50, their take-home pay, their gross salary of £19,760, their take-home pay as it stands at this point in time will be £17,099, presuming that they have a normal tax code of 1257L. Given slight changes in the thresholds of national insurance, as at before the statement today, their take home would have been £17,013, and now after the announcement in the statement today, their take home pay will be £17,369, which means that from the tax year we're in now, where against what they will take home come the end of April, is that in their pocket, in theory, they will take home £270 more per annum, and that kind of filters through. So someone on £25,000 will take home £205 more a year. Someone on £30,000 will take home £142 more a year. Now, this, of course, is cash, not necessarily real cash. So the counter argument to that is, of course, that £142 doesn't go anywhere near as far as it used to 12 months ago because of the rate of inflation. Now, the parity point where you reach a neutral position where you start to earn less, even with the increase in national insurance contribution levy and the increase in the national insurance contribution threshold, is £41,389. So anyone below £41,389 will take home slightly more at the end of April than what they would have done at the end of March, presuming their tax code is 1257L. Anyone above £41,389 will take home slightly less, which will affect probably a lot of your dental nurses, receptionists, and indeed practice managers in the practice. So that's something which you may want to give consideration to when you're considering what to do about pay rises going into the next fiscal year. That probably was the biggest announcement. There were a couple of smaller announcements. So those of you which run predominantly private practice, the employment allowance, which is in essence the discount you get on employers' NI contributions that you're not entitled to if you're predominantly NHS business, has increased from £4,000 to £5,000. So you've got, if you like, £1,000 tax saving there. Equally, if you're paying business rates, the business rates relief discount of 50%, presuming that your rateable value is below £110,000, which most dental practices are, but probably not a lot of dental practice groups, given the multiple properties that you own. That was already announced. It wasn't a new announcement, but you have, of course, got that 50% tax or business rates discount going into the next fiscal year as well. And he announced a couple of smaller things, but without any kind of real detail on them. So the headlines that will be across all the newspapers tomorrow is that there will be an income rate tax cut from 20 pence in the pound to 19 pence in the pound for the basic rate threshold. But there was no meat on the bones of that. It was just by the end of Parliament. And of course, the devil is always in the detail of these things. So what it may mean is that whilst the basic rate tax threshold goes down from 20 pence to 90 pence, if I was being a cynic, you might argue that maybe some of the thresholds, which of course have already being maintained at the same level, so there's of course arguably a stealth tax in the fact that they aren't being increased with inflation, and maybe potentially it might have an impact later on higher rate tax. So it's a big headline, but potentially always look for the detail in these things. And secondly, a review of the apprenticeship incentive. So at the moment, the current scheme, which was paying up to £4,000 inclusive, has recently closed. And at the moment, if you take on an apprentice, so i.e. someone who's aged between 16 and 18 on an apprenticeship, or someone who's a little bit older who meets other certain conditions, you can get up to £1,000 incentive from the government. It was up to £4,000 up until the end of January if they started their employment by the end of January, and last the apprenticeship by the end of March. That has recently dropped off. He's going to do a review of that. So again, you would assume that maybe that scheme is going to be reintroduced in some form. And there was a couple of ancillary announcements to do with solar panels and heat pumps, but nothing really potentially that's going to affect the vast majority of dental practices. So in the main, the big announcement is to do with what he's doing for lower earners and how it affects what their take-home pay. So on their pay slips, in theory, they will take home slightly more than they would have done at 10 a.m. this morning, and arguably they're going to take home slightly more than what they have been doing. But of course, this is all in the context of the fact that with inflation, probably their household bills and their journey to work is getting more expensive. Those are the headlines. As we said, we keep it brief. If you have got any questions, do feel free to drop me a line, which is luke.moore@dentalelite.co.uk. Or alternatively, we will be at the Dental Showcase this weekend. So if you are coming along to the Dental Showcase event at London's Excel, we do have a stand there, and the team and myself will be there all day Friday and Saturday. So it would be great to grab you for a coffee if you tend to be there. Hopefully catch up soon.